Hello there, and welcome back, everybody. So, tonight's soft spoken video is going to be another story time regarding a situation in my life. This one started December last year, December 2023. And it's to do with my eldest son. He is 18. Obviously I won't mention any names, but going back a little bit, my son has always had issues with his digestive system and his bowels, etc. Anyway, a long story short, he ended up with what is called a prolapse. Now, I know pregnant women can get it with the uterus. A prolapse is when on a woman the uterus will come out, hang down. Now, with my son, it happened in his rectum. It's rectal prolapse, and for 2 years he suffered with this. So from the age of 15 onwards, which is so young and such a big thing to deal with, especially as my eldest son suffers greatly with anxiety, social anxiety, somewhat depression. And anyway, so it came to the point, it was very, very severe. It was affecting his daily life, where he could go, how long he was on the toilet for, which was a long time. It's very hard to explain without going into graphic details, which I'll spare you. We took him to the hospital a few times regarding this, and with the hospitals where I am, it's all wait. He finally got examined by a doctor, a surgeon, and said that Spencer would need surgery to basically fix the prolapse, the rectal prolapse, to basically cut a lot away and stitch it inside so it wouldn't keep falling down. I'm trying to use my words so it doesn't sound gross. So at the beginning of December, he went into surgery. He had it done. He was obviously very sore afterwards. Excuse me. He was very sore afterwards with stitches, etc. Very uncomfortable to sit down, as you can expect. Anyway, he came home the next day, and he kept having these fluctuating temperatures. Obviously he was aching a lot back there, but he'd keep getting these temperatures. And I think it was on the third day, he tried to go the toilet for the first time, if you understand me. Number 2, because that's always the worst one. It can kill because it's come past the stitches, so it really, really kills and hurts. And he did, and I was like, brilliant, Spen, well done. But he kept saying to me, I don't feel well, Mum, I don't feel well. And his temperature was just up and down. It was so strange, and we just put it down to he's just come out of surgery, And I think it was on the day after, he went to go to the toilet again, and I just heard him shout, Mum. And I says, what? He says, Luke. And where he'd been to the toilet, it was covered in blood. Now, up until that point, he had not seen any at all, so it wasn't like, I know from surgery you can spot and see spots of blood and have a little bit of blood from the day of surgery, and then it gradually decreases. This was not the case. He had seen no blood, and all of a sudden there was a lot. So I'm thinking, has it a stitch come undone? So I contacted 111, and they told me to make an appointment with my doctors that day, which I did. Spence went to see the doctor. They couldn't obviously go up there internally because he was still so sore and he'd had stitches basically. But they said it was normal. He'd had stitches. Some people bleed more than others, which didn't make sense because I thought, well, why wasn't he bleeding from the get-go? And it was just like it came out all of a sudden. But you know, they do all the questions and said it's normal, and if it carries on, then just make another appointment. And then he was still feeling quite rough. And then it was the night afterwards. He came downstairs. It was about 8 o'clock at night. He came downstairs crying, hunched over, holding his stomach. And he was like, Mom, Mom. And he was almost crying in pain. And I was like, what is this? My stomach kills. Right, so we took him up the A&E, accident and emergency department. And he was in there. We were waiting. We got seen. We got given a bed, but he hadn't been seen by a doctor. But he was in bed, and we had to wait. I think it was 36. Was it 36 hours? I'm just trying to think. I'm sure it was a day and a half. And that's when he saw a doctor. Basically, we're in there way over 24 hours. And then a doctor finally saw him. By this point, Spencer was vomiting blood. He had a very high temperature again. And basically they said, you might as well go home. What we're going to do is we're going to give Spencer a scan to see if there's any abnormalities. Anyway, long story short, they did a scan. We were at home. They did a scan. Then a doctor rang me back and said, is that Spencer's mum? I've said his name now, so is that Spencer's mum? I said yes. They were said, right, we're going to take him directly down to surgery right now within the next hour if you want to come, blah blah. I was like, what's the matter? He said, we found abnormalities. We need to open him up, see what's going on, give him a flush out, and they're chucking all these words at me, and I'm like, whoa. Anyway, then he was in surgery, and trying to think, it was all a blur. He was in surgery, and then he'd been in there a couple of hours. Now, the last time he was in 2 or 3 hours. This was going on like for 4 and 5 hours. And I thought, something's wrong here, something's wrong. And you try and tell yourself, maybe it's because he was a different surgeon. So, maybe there's other things they've had to do. But I don't know, this gut instinct kept telling me like something's up. Why is it taking so long? Which I think is natural for people, but I couldn't shake this feeling. And then he came out 5 hours. Oh, that was the surgeon spoke to us first. He said, I just want to let you know I'm doctor. And he had this, I forget his name now. It was Tiakis or something. I think he was... I'm not sure if he's Polish or something. I'm so awful with accents. Brilliant bloke, brilliant. And he says, I'm the surgeon. Shook our hands, very, very nice. He said Spencer had severe sepsis due to an infection. He had something else, another type of infection also. His stitches had come all undone from the previous surgery. And he says basically, he's in a very bad way. He says he's completely, fully sedated now. We're going to keep him sedated, put him on ventilator. We want his body to nothing, not even breathe on its own. We need Spencer's body to just fully focus on recovering and fighting everything off and getting well again. And he says, I will warn you, it's a frightening sight to see. And he was just laid out on the bed in this pot. He was put into the intensive care. He was put into the intensive care pod, where he had 24-hour round the clock person looking after him, nurse. He'd had, and that was it, they also had to give him a stoma. He had surgery, so he couldn't go to the toilet through his back passage, so that was an extra surgery he had. But basically he had tubes going into the side of him. He had obviously tubes going down his throat, up his nose. He was on the ventilator. He had this pipe going from underneath his dressing gown, and a bag filling with blood and things like that, and a bag here draining something. It was absolutely awful. And the most frustrating thing was, I kept saying, but he is going to be all right, isn't he? He is going to be all right. And all that they could ever say, which I get now, but at that time I just wanted someone to say, it looks bad, but he's going to be fine. And they said he was very, very close of not being here. He says, so yeah, basically, he says all we can do is see how he responds within the next 24 hours. And I was absolutely convinced I was going to lose my son. And people say, think positive, but I can't even explain it, because thinking positive would have been the best thing to do, but I could not imagine trying to think positive and then having to lose my son. I was preparing myself for the worst, because that was the only way I was going to have somewhat be able to cope. I couldn't in the life of me ever imagine losing my child. I've been through some stuff in my life, but I've always bounced back. I've always been able to see a way around it or think positively about it. I've always been able to see, this might happen, but it's okay, everything will be all right, but in this instant I could not see anything. And when I was eating, walking, brushing my teeth, I was crying and crying and crying. I could not function. It was like I was in this black hole in the middle of black eternity, with nothing around me, nothing to see, nothing to hear. I was just gone. I can't even explain it. I have never, ever, ever felt like that in my entire life. Through everything, the things that and the things that you don't. I mean, I've been through some pretty bad crap, a load of us have, but I've never felt like this before. It was utter, just like looking down at the oblivion. I can't even explain it. I can't. There's no words. Anyway, so fast forwarding a little bit, people were great, friends, family, people on Facebook, sending prayers and well wishes. And then over the next 24 hours, I spoke to the nurse who was on early in the morning. I went in there and I said, how is he? She said, we've had him responding this morning. And I was like, Oh, I can't explain the relief. I can't explain the relief. It was mind blowing. I was like, so is he talking? Does he know I'm here? You know? And she was like, "He's what it is. The doctor had completely, deeply sedated him, and what they were doing now through his drip, obviously, was lessening the sedation and bringing him back to conscious slowly." So I'd go up to him, look down at him on the bed, and I'd be like, "You alright, Spen?" And he'd be just, the thing in his house, "Spen." But then if on his shoulder, "You alright, Spen?" and shouted a little bit, he'd go, as if to say, "Yeah." I was like, oh God, right. Anyway, over that course of the day, the lessons is sedation. And he started coming more and more too. And then thankfully, because his blood pressure drops dangerously low, that started, the numbers were going the right way on the monitors, and they managed to reduce the blood pressure medication as well. And he finally come to, and then he had this thing where he was constantly being sick, because when they took out the ventilator, it gave him a very, very sore throat, but he had this thing where he kept gagging, so they gave him like this long tube thing, like a sucker. So every time he was having saliva come up and stuff, because there was nothing in there obviously to bring up, he was being fed with that formula stuff, TMP or something like that. So it was just saliva, so he kept, every time he was retching, he was just sucking up the saliva in this tube. But yeah, and then after a couple of days, they transferred him from the intensive care to the critical ward. Again, that's where they have their own sort of nurses, and then they had the physiotherapy people come round, try and learn him how to walk and sit up again by himself. Gradually just moving him around slowly, try and get him on his feet, on his legs, and that type of thing. It was a slow process, but every day he kept doing it. And then obviously we were then shown by the stoma care team how to change his stoma. Now, for those of you who don't know what a stoma is, basically Spen, he could no longer go the toilet through the normal back passageway, so he had to have his large intestine, or the bottom of his, not intestine, bowel, basically sort of come through. They had to make a hole in his stomach. You've heard of colostomy bags, this is what it's for, and it's almost like part of it that comes through a hole in his stomach. So essentially he goes through his stoma into the colostomy bag, which he wears, a stoma bag. And the doctor asked him it's temporary or he can keep it, so he decided on keeping it. It's a lot easier for Spencer. As I say, he's always had issues with his digestive system and all that, and even without the rectal prolapse, he had issues with down there and toileting. So yeah, he now has obviously a stoma, and even though it's been January, February, March, April, 4 months now, his hair is still falling out. We had to shave his hair because of the sepsis. His body went through that much trauma, because he was in there for about 3-4 weeks, I think. But his body been through much trauma, and he's still lack of energy, which can take up to a year to even feel somewhat normal again once you've had sepsis. Like I say, he was losing his hair still, so we've just shaved that off. One less thing to worry about, because every time he was seen hair on the pillow or in the shower, it was very disheartening for him. So yeah, and he has to have his iron tablets on prescription. He has to constantly have Lactolose to keep his motion somewhat, so it's not hard, because obviously now he has got a stoma. But the stomas also come with certain issues, so it's getting used to them. You can get a lot of ulcers from soreness around, essentially like, nappy rash on a baby. When they're number 2 and that sits there, it can make them sore. Same with stoma around the edge of, because I say it's like a hole about that big when they cut him, and it's part of the bowel that comes out. So it's a little bit like a donut, it's like that, and the number 2 will come through there. It's pushed out. I'm sure you know what one's like, but this was all new to us. But yeah, I mean, that's Ben's story, and it was one of the most gut-wrenching, most pivotal points in my life, because as I say, I've never felt like that when I thought I was going to lose my child. It was just like saying his poor little body has been through so much. He's struggling to gain weight. Like I say, his hair's still falling out. He's still very fatigued. But after sepsis, it is a long recovery, as I'm sure you know if you yourself have had it, or like I say, you did have it severe. Along with this, I forget the other word for this. It was the other infection he had, which was the crazy thing as well. Is the stomach pain that he had was actually caused by this other infection he had. Now, if he hadn't had this other infection, he would never have gone to the hospital in the first place, because that's not a sign of sepsis, and it would have been too late. So I am thankful that he actually had, we've spoke about this, we're thankful he actually had the other infection, although it was a double whammy. That's what alerted Spencer something was wrong, so I just thank God for that. But yes, he is getting there now, slowly but surely. It's a slow progress. But that's why, if you look back over my channel, you'll see I did a couple of videos just after, was it just before Christmas Day or just after Christmas Day, and then there was nothing. That's the reason why. But yeah, well, thank you all very much for listening. If you did listen, if you made it to the end, then thank you very much, because I know I do go on a bit. And I don't know if you like these type of stories, but I just hope it's relaxing and you just hear me ramble somewhat relaxed you anyway, even if the situation of the story times aren't interesting. But yeah, so I will see you all really soon, and thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.